When my brother Marcus demanded I sell my late husband's Olympic gold medals to fund his lavish wedding, I smiled sweetly and said, "Of course, family comes first." By 48 hours later, I had received 17 panicked texts begging me to fix this mess immediately. And that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I'm Elena Rodriguez, 34 years old, and 2 days ago, I watched my entire family's world crumble with a single phone call. My phone buzzes incessantly now. Marcus, my parents, even his fiancée Brittany, all desperately trying to undo what they set in motion. But some things, once broken, can't be easily repaired. 3 years ago, I lost my husband David in a climbing accident. He was 32, an Olympic swimmer who'd dedicated his life to representing our country. 2 gold medals from Rio, 1 from Tokyo, each worth roughly $25,000 to collectors, but priceless to me. They sat in my living room, displayed in a custom case David had built himself, surrounded by photos of his training, his teammates, his infectious smile. After David's death, I threw myself in preserving his legacy. I established the David Rodriguez Youth Swimming Foundation with a $200,000 donation from his life insurance policy. Every month, I contributed another $3,000 from my software engineer salary. The foundation provided equipment, coaching, and scholarships to underprivileged kids who dreamed of swimming competitively. David would have loved that. He'd grown up poor in East LA, learning to swim at the overcrowded community pool. My family seemed supportive initially. Mom would bring homemade tamales when I worked late on foundation paperwork. Dad helped install new security features around the house. Even Marcus, 3 years younger and perpetually between jobs, would stop by to check on me, though he always seemed more interested in examining David's medals than comforting his grieving sister. "Those are some serious pieces of hardware," he'd say, holding the Rio gold medal up to the light. "Must be worth a fortune." "They're not for sale, Marcus," I'd reply firmly. "They're David's legacy." But Marcus never seemed to hear that part. The foundation grew steadily. By last month, we were supporting 47 young swimmers across Los Angeles County. The walls of my home office displayed thank you letters from kids who'd earned their first scholarships, photos from swim meets where our athletes placed, newspaper clippings about the foundation's impact. Each success felt like David's spirit living on. Marcus, meanwhile, cycled through his usual pattern of jobs: 6 months as a used car salesman, 3 months in a telemarketing company, 4 months attempting to launch a cryptocurrency trading business with borrowed money. His longest employment stint was 8 months at a high-end electronics store, which ended when he was caught borrowing merchandise for personal use. Despite his instability, our parents continued their unwavering support. "Marcus is still finding himself," Mom would explain when I questioned his latest failed venture. "Not everyone can be as naturally focused as you, mija." 8 months ago, Marcus introduced us to Brittany Chen, a dental hygienist from Beverly Hills. Brittany was undeniably beautiful. Long black hair, designer clothes, a smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials. She drove a leased BMW, carried a Louis Vuitton purse, and seemed genuinely smitten with my unemployed brother. "He's the one," Marcus announced after dating her for 6 weeks. "I'm going to marry this woman." Their engagement party was held at Brittany's parents' restaurant in Koreatown, an upscale establishment where dinner for 2 easily cost $200. The guest list included Brittany's sorority sisters, her parents' business associates, and several Instagram influencers I didn't recognize. Marcus beamed as he showed off his $15,000 engagement ring purchase. Financed, I later learned, through 3 different credit cards. "We're thinking a destination wedding," Brittany announced, holding court near the champagne fountain. "Maybe Tuscany or the French Riviera, something really special, you know?" I watched my brother nod enthusiastically, already mentally spending money he didn't have. The planning began immediately. Brittany created Pinterest boards for Tuscan romance and Mediterranean elegance. She researched venues costing $50,000 just for the location rental. The guest list expanded from 50 to 150 to 200 people. Flowers alone were estimated at $8,000. "These things add up faster than you'd expect," Mom confided during one of our weekly dinners. "But Marcus deserves happiness after struggling for so long." I bit my tongue, remembering how my own wedding to David had cost $12,000 total. A beautiful ceremony at the local botanical gardens, followed by a reception at the community center where David had learned to coach kids. Our happiness didn't require a mortgage-sized budget. 3 weeks ago, the first hint of financial reality hit. Marcus arrived at my house on a Tuesday evening, fidgeting with his car keys and avoiding eye contact. "Elena, I need to ask you something," he began, settling into David's old armchair without invitation. "The wedding costs are getting pretty intense, and Brittany's parents can only cover so much." "How much are we talking about?" I asked quickly, as if speaking faster would lessen the impact. "Total budget is around $180,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Brittany's dreamed of a wedding like this since she was little." $180,000. More than 3 times my annual salary. More than David had earned in his best Olympic year. "Marcus, that's an enormous amount of money," I said carefully. "What's your contribution plan?" He launched into a convoluted explanation involving a business loan he was about to secure, potential investors in a new venture, and optimistic projections about his sales commission potential. All fantasy, of course. Marcus hadn't held steady employment in 8 months. I was hoping maybe the family could help bridge the gap temporarily, just until my business deals come through. I felt the familiar weight of family expectations settling on my shoulders. As the successful sibling, the one with steady income and assets, I was always expected to be generous when others fell short.
Last Saturday morning changed everything. I was reviewing foundation applications when Marcus and Brittany arrived unannounced, followed immediately by my parents. The coordinated timing felt suspicious, like an intervention. "We need to talk," Dad said, settling heavily onto my couch. His tone carried the authority he'd used during our childhood, the voice that ended arguments and expected compliance. Brittany perched nervously on the edge of the coffee table, her usual confidence replaced by calculated vulnerability. "Elena, I know you think our wedding budget is excessive, but this isn't just about us. It's about representing our families properly. Both our social circles have certain expectations," Marcus added, his voice gaining strength as he warmed to his pitch. "Brittany's parents own 3 restaurants. My groomsmen include guys from college who've done really well. We can't look cheap." Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mija, you've been so generous with that swimming foundation, but maybe it's time to prioritize family differently." I felt ice forming in my stomach. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Marcus cleared his throat, the gesture I remembered from childhood when he was about to ask for something he knew was unreasonable. "Those medals of David's are just sitting there. I've done research. Olympic gold medals from recent games sell for $30,000 to $40,000 each, sometimes more if there's an interesting story attached. The words hit me like a physical blow. You want me to sell David's medals? Not sell exactly, Brittany interjected quickly. More like liquidate assets for family investment. The medals aren't doing anyone any good locked in that case. David is dead, Elena, Marcus said bluntly, his frustration finally showing. Those medals can't bring him back, but they could give me and Brittany the wedding we deserve. Think about living people for once. The cruelty of that statement hung in the air. My parents, rather than defending David's memory or acknowledging the hurtfulness of Marcus's words, nodded in uncomfortable agreement. Marcus has a point, Dad said quietly. David would want you to help family. He was always generous that way. I looked around the room at these people who shared my blood, who claimed to love me, who were asking me to sell the most precious remnants of my husband's life to fund a party for a couple with no savings, no steady income, and no realistic plan for their future. You understand this is my late husband's Olympic medals, I said slowly, wanting to be absolutely clear. The medals he trained 15 years to earn, the medals he was holding when he proposed to me, the medals that represent the greatest achievements of his life. We understand they're sentimental, Mom replied gently, but Marcus's happiness is important too. You've had 3 years to grieve, mija. Maybe it's time to let go and help your brother build his future. Brittany leaned forward, her expression shifting to something I recognized as calculated manipulation. Elena, I know you're protective of David's memory, but honestly, dead men don't need gold medals. Living people need support from their families. The casual dismissal of my husband, dead men don't need gold medals, crystallized something inside me. These weren't people who cared about my well-being or respected my marriage. They were people who saw me as a resource to be exploited and David's memory as an obstacle to overcome. Marcus sensed my wavering resolve and pressed his advantage. Look, you make good money. You have no kids, no major expenses except that swimming foundation thing. Brittany and I are starting our lives together. We need this help more than some dead guy needs trophies. That swimming foundation thing helps 47 children pursue their dreams, I replied matter-of-factly. And that's very noble, Dad said in his most patronizing tone. But family comes first, Cassandra. Always. You can restart the foundation later when Marcus and Brittany are established. I looked at each of their faces, Marcus expectant, Brittany calculating, my parents determined. They had already decided among themselves that I would comply. The conversation wasn't a request, it was an announcement of their decision. You've all discussed this already, I realized aloud. We're concerned about Marcus's happiness and about your ability to move forward with your life. Holding on to David's things so tightly isn't healthy. Something shifted inside me then, a cold clarity I hadn't felt since David's funeral. These people were asking me to betray the most important relationship of my life to fund their delusions of grandeur. More than that, they expected me to be grateful for the opportunity. I smiled for the first time since they'd arrived, and I saw Marcus relax, interpreting my expression as surrender. You're absolutely right, I said sweetly. Family should come first. Of course I'll help with the medals. The relief on their faces was immediate and profound. Brittany actually clapped her hands together. Oh, Elena, thank you so much. You won't regret this. Our wedding is going to be absolutely magical. I'll make some calls this week, I continued, my voice warm with false cooperation. Find the right buyers, get proper appraisals. These things should be done correctly." Marcus stood up and hugged me, and for a moment I remembered the little boy who used to build blanket forts with me, who cried when he scraped his knees, who once told me he was my favorite person in the whole world. That little boy was gone. In his place stood a man willing to destroy his sister's most precious memories to fund his fantasy wedding. "I should probably be getting going," Brittany said, checking her phone. "I have a dress fitting at 3. Elena, seriously, thank you for being so understanding about this." After they left, I sat alone in my living room, staring at David's medals gleaming in their case. The afternoon sun caught the gold, throwing warm reflections across the walls, covered with photos of our life together. I thought about the 17-year-old David practicing butterfly strokes for 6 hours daily in a pool that reeked of too much chlorine. I remembered his hands shaking as he stood on the podium in Rio, tears streaming down his face as the national anthem played. I recalled the weight of the medals when he placed them around my neck the night he proposed to me, whispering that he was his greatest victory. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thanks again, sis. You're the best. Brittany's already looking at upgraded venues." I deleted the message and began making phone calls, but not to metal buyers. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, methodically calculating numbers that told the story of my family's exploitation. The mathematical precision calmed me, transforming hurt into strategy. Over the past 3 years, I had loaned Marcus $23,000 in various emergencies, none of which had been repaid. Rent when he was between jobs, $8,400. Car repairs that were temporary setbacks, $4,200. Credit card debt from his cryptocurrency venture, $6,800. Medical bills from an emergency room visit after a bar fight, $2,100. Various smaller loans for opportunities that never materialized, $1,500. But the loans were just the beginning. I'd paid for family dinners at expensive restaurants when Marcus brought dates he wanted to impress, $2,800. I'd covered his share of parents' anniversary and birthday gifts for the past 2 years, $1,300. I'd even bought him an $800 suit for job interviews that led nowhere. Total financial support provided to Marcus, $27,900. Total amount repaid, $0. Total gratitude expressed before today's demand, minimal. I opened my laptop and accessed the foundation's financial records. $200,000 initial donation, $108,000 in subsequent monthly contributions, $15,000 in fundraising events I'd organized personally. The foundation's total assets, $378,000, supporting 47 young swimmers with equipment, coaching, and scholarships. My family wanted me to liquidate $60,000 worth of medals to fund a wedding for someone who'd never repaid a single loan, to marry someone who thought dead men don't need gold medals. I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine David and I had been saving for our 5th anniversary, a bottle that would now never be opened for its intended purpose, and felt something I hadn't experienced since his death: absolute clarity about what needed to happen. The numbers continued rolling through my head as I moved to David's home office, which I'd left untouched for 3 years. His Olympic credentials hung framed on the wall next to photos with famous swimmers, coaches, and the children he'd mentored. His coaching certifications, letters from young athletes he'd inspired, a life of actual achievement and meaningful impact. I thought about Marcus's resume over the same period: 6 failed jobs, 3 get-rich-quick schemes, numerous borrowing requests, and now a demand to sell his dead brother-in-law's Olympic medals to fund a fantasy wedding? My phone buzzed with another text from Brittany.
Alina, I found the perfect flowers for the ceremony. Italian white roses, $12,000 for the arrangements. Can't wait to celebrate properly. $12,000 for flowers that would wilt in a day, more than David's family had spent on his funeral. I walked to the metal case and opened it for the first time since David's memorial service. The weight of the gold in my hands triggered a memory. David practicing his acceptance speech in our bathroom mirror, worried he'd cry too much to speak coherently. Alina, what if I can't get the words out? What if I disappoint everyone? He'd asked. You could never disappoint me, I'd replied. Just speak from your heart. And he had. His speech about swimming to honor his grandmother who'd cleaned other people's pools to pay for his lessons had made headlines. David never forgot where he came from or who had sacrificed for his success, unlike some people I knew. I carefully returned the medals to their case and locked it. Then I reached for my phone and began making the calls that would change everything. But not to medal buyers. Those calls would wait until tomorrow. Monday morning, I arrived at work early and requested a private meeting with our company's legal counsel, Sarah Martinez. As our head of intellectual property, Sarah dealt regularly with high-value asset protection and had become a friend over the years. Alina, you look serious, she observed as I settled into her office. Everything okay? I explained the situation methodically, the wedding demands, the medal proposal, my family's expectations. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes. Those medals aren't just valuable as gold, she said when I finished. Olympic medals have documentary provenance, historical significance, and personal story value. For collectors, you're looking at $25,000 to $35,000 each, possibly more given David's inspiring background. That's what I estimated, I confirmed, but I'm not calling to sell them. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What do you need then? I want to donate them to the Olympic Training Center Museum. Full tax-deductible donation at fair market value. I want the donation processed immediately, announced publicly, and made irreversible. Sarah's expression shifted to something resembling admiration. That's actually brilliant. Tax benefit to you, permanent honor to David's memory, and completely removes the medals from any potential family pressure. Exactly. And I want the press release to specifically mention that the donation was made in lieu of liquidating the medals for personal use, choosing instead to honor their inspirational value for future generations of athletes. Subtle, Sarah smiled. I like it. We can have this processed by Wednesday, announced Thursday. Perfect. One more thing. I need a restraining order consultation. I suspect my family's reaction will be intense. My second call was to Dr. Jennifer Huang, the Foundation's financial advisor. Elena, good to hear from you. How can I help? I want to restructure the Foundation's funding model. Instead of my monthly contributions, I want to establish a more substantial endowment that can operate independently. What kind of endowment are we discussing? $300,000 initial funding. I want it managed professionally so the foundation can continue even if something happens to me. Dr. Huang was quiet for a moment. Elena, that's a significant commitment. Are you sure about the timing? I've never been more certain of anything. My third call was to Detective Morrison, who'd handled David's accident case. Elena, how are you holding up? I need advice about financial harassment, family members pressuring me to liquidate assets, making threats about consequences if I don't comply. Document everything, he advised immediately. Save texts, record conversation if legal in your state, keep financial records. If they escalate to actual threats, we can discuss charges. Thank you. I'll keep you posted. My final Monday call was to Marcus. He answered on the first ring. Elena, perfect timing. Brittany found an amazing venue in Napa Valley. It's $80,000 just for the weekend, but totally worth it for the ambiance. How are those metal appraisals coming? Actually, Marcus, I need to tell you something important. I kept my voice warm, familial. I've decided you're absolutely right about family coming first. Oh, good. I was worried you might be having second thoughts. Not at all. In fact, I'm planning something really special. Can you keep it a secret until Wednesday? I want to surprise everyone. Of course. What kind of surprise? Let's just say David's medals are going to make a much bigger impact than we originally discussed. You'll be so proud of what we're accomplishing. Marcus's excitement was palpable. Elena, you're incredible. Brittany's going to be thrilled. Should we plan the upgraded venue? I'd wait until Wednesday for any major decisions. Trust me, everything's going to work out perfectly. Tuesday passed quietly. I worked from home, organizing documents and preparing for what I knew would be an explosive confrontation. My phone remained silent. Marcus and Brittany were probably researching expensive wedding upgrades, my parents likely planning how to praise my mature decision. Wednesday morning, the Olympic Training Center release went live at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Software engineer donates late husband's Olympic gold medals to inspire future athletes. Elena Rodriguez of Los Angeles has donated her late husband, David Rodriguez, 2 Olympic gold medals to the Olympic Training Center Museum, where they will be displayed permanently to inspire future generations of swimmers. The medals, earned at the Rio and Tokyo Olympics, are valued at approximately $60,000. David always believed his achievements belonged to the community that supported him, said Mrs. Rodriguez. Rather than liquidate these medals for personal use, I chose to ensure they continue inspiring young athletes who shared David's dreams. The medals will anchor a new exhibit on athletes who overcome adversity, scheduled to open next month. Rodriguez also announced a $300,000 endowment to the David Rodriguez Youth Swimming Foundation, supporting underprivileged swimmers nationwide.
By 9:15 a.m., my phone began buzzing. Text from Marcus at 9:16 a.m. Elena, what the hell is this news article? Call me now. Text from Brittany at 9:19 a.m. Elena, this is not what we agreed on. You promised to help us. Text from Mom at 9:22 a.m. Mija, please call me. There must be some mistake with this announcement. Text from Marcus at 9:25 a.m. You lied to us. We already put deposits down on everything because you promised. I turned off my phone and went for a long walk in Griffith Park, the same trails where David and I used to hike on weekends. The morning sun felt warm on my face, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt genuinely at peace. When I returned home and turned my phone back on at 2 p.m., I had 17 text messages, 11 voicemails, and 6 missed calls. Text from Marcus at 11:30 a.m. Answer your phone. We need to fix this now. Text from Brittany at 11:45 a.m. I can't believe you would sabotage our wedding like this. We trusted you. Text from Dad at 12:15 p.m. Elena, this is very disappointing. Your brother is in real trouble now. Text from Marcus at 12:30 p.m. I told Brittany's parents we had $60,000 coming. They're furious. You need to make this right. Text from Mom at 1:15 p.m. Please call us. Marcus is having a panic attack. Text from Marcus at 1:45 p.m. Elena, I'm begging you. Can you reverse this somehow? Please don't destroy my life. I poured myself a cup of coffee and returned Marcus's call. Hello, Marcus. I'm sorry you're upset, but I don't understand the problem. You said family should come first, and I completely agreed. You said you'd sell the medals for the wedding. Actually, I never said that. I said I'd help with the medals, and that you'd be proud of what we accomplished. And you should be proud.
David's medals are going to inspire thousands of young athletes. Elena, this isn't a game. His voice cracked with desperation. Brittany's parents put deposits down based on my promise about the medal money. Her dad co-signed loans because I told him we had assets. I'm going to lose everything. Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only person who ever had those assets was me. You never actually had $60,000. You just assumed I'd give it to you. You led us to believe. I led you to believe I cared about family. And I do. I care enough about David's family legacy to preserve it properly, rather than selling it to fund a party. The silence on the line stretched uncomfortably long. Elena, please, he whispered finally. I'm drowning here. Brittany's threatening to call off the wedding. Her parents want to sue me for fraud. I need help. I understand you're in a difficult situation, but perhaps this is a good opportunity to reconsider whether a $180,000 wedding is realistic for someone with no steady income and $27,900 in unrepaid loans to family members. You're bringing up old money now? Not old money, Marcus. Current debt. I've been very patient about repayment, but given your recent financial commitments, maybe we should formalize a payment plan. Another long silence. I can't afford to pay you back and fund this wedding. Then you have a choice to make. I'm sure you'll figure out the right path forward. Family always finds a way, don't you think? I hung up before he could respond. Thursday brought a different kind of communication from my family. The desperate texts were replaced by angry voicemails, and eventually, silence. But the wider consequences were just beginning. Brittany's Instagram account, which had been documenting wedding preparations for months, suddenly went dark. The venue deposits they couldn't afford without the medal money were forfeited. The designer dress ordered on credit was canceled, along with the photographer, the Italian flowers, and the Napa Valley weekend rental. Dr. Huang called with updates on the foundation endowment. Elena, the initial news coverage has generated additional donations. 3 major swimming equipment companies want to sponsor scholarships. You've created something beautiful here. The Olympic Training Center's curator, Michael Thompson, invited me to the medal display ceremony. David's story resonates with everyone who visits, he told me. The exhibit is already inspiring young swimmers to see past their circumstances. Meanwhile, my family's response evolved through predictable stages. Anger gave way to guilt tripping, which transformed into bargaining, then desperate manipulation. Mom called Sunday evening, her voice carefully modulated for maximum emotional impact. Mija, Marcus had to move back home. Brittany broke up with him. He's devastated. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied genuinely. Breakups are always difficult. This could have been prevented if you'd just helped with the wedding money. Mom, I did help with the wedding. I helped them avoid going into catastrophic debt for a party they couldn't afford. That's what people who love each other do. They prevent each other from making destructive choices. But Marcus is so depressed now, he won't even look for work. I felt a familiar tug of guilt, then remembered Marcus telling me dead men don't need gold medals and Brittany dismissing David's memory entirely. Marcus is 31 years old. His emotional well-being isn't my responsibility to manage, especially after he asked me to sell my late husband's Olympic medals to fund his fantasy. Elena, that's very harsh. We're family. Yes, we are. And family members should treat each other with basic respect and consideration. They shouldn't dismiss each other's grief or demand the liquidation of irreplaceable mementos. Mom was quiet for a long moment. We just wanted Marcus to be happy. But at my expense, though. My happiness didn't factor into your planning. That's not true. Mom, you asked me to sell my dead husband's Olympic medals to fund a wedding for someone who's never held a job for more than 8 months and has never repaid a single loan. You prioritized Marcus's wants over my most precious memories. That's the definition of treating my happiness as expendable. The conversation ended without resolution, but something felt lighter about the exchange. I wasn't angry anymore, just clear about the boundaries I needed to maintain. 2 weeks later, Dad attempted a different approach. He arrived at my house Saturday morning with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery, a peace offering gesture from our childhood. Elena, I've been thinking about everything that happened. Maybe we didn't handle the metal situation very well. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get from him. Thank you for saying that. It means something. But I'm worried about this distance between you and Marcus. He's really struggling. Dad, Marcus is struggling because he made financial commitments he couldn't honor based on assumptions about other people's money. That's not a family problem. That's a personal responsibility problem. But couldn't you help him somehow? Maybe not the metals, but some other way. I set down my coffee and looked at my father. This man who taught me to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked me down the aisle at my wedding to David. This man who was now asking me to rescue his adult son from consequences of his own choices. I've already helped Marcus to the tune of $27,900 in unrepaid loans over 3 years. I helped by preventing him from going into massive debt for a wedding he couldn't afford. I helped by showing him that actions have consequences, which is apparently something he's never learned. Elena, he's your brother. And David was my husband. Marcus asked me to sell David's Olympic medals, medals David trained 15 years to earn, medals that represent the greatest achievements of his life, to fund a party. Dad, how is that reasonable to ask of someone? My father stared into his coffee cup. When you put it that way, there's no other way to put it. Marcus wanted me to liquidate my dead husband's Olympic medals to fund his wedding, and when I found a way to honor David's memory instead, Marcus called me 17 times in a panic because he'd made promises with money he never actually had. I see your point, Dad admitted quietly. The foundation endowment I created will help hundreds of young swimmers over the years. David's medals will inspire kids at the Olympic Training Center. Marcus and Brittany got to experience the consequences of making financial commitments without actual resources. Everyone learned something valuable. Dad nodded slowly. You've grown very strong since David's death. I've had to. Grief either breaks you down or builds you up. I chose to build something meaningful rather than enable destructive patterns. 3 months later, I received an unexpected text from Marcus. Elena, I got a job at the county recreation center, teaching swim lessons. Brittany and I are going to couples therapy. I think I understand now why you did what you did. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'm proud of you for finding work that uses your talents. David would have loved that you're teaching kids to swim. His reply came quickly. I'm sorry about what I said about David and the medals. I was thinking only about myself. Thank you for saying that. It means everything. Can we maybe have coffee sometime? I'd like to hear more about the foundation. I'd like that very much.
6 months after the medal donation, the David Rodriguez Youth Swimming Foundation had expanded to support 73 young athletes across 3 states. The Olympic Training Center exhibit featuring David's medals had welcomed over 15,000 visitors. Marcus had been promoted to head swim instructor at the rec center and was coaching a competitive team of teenagers from low-income families. Most surprisingly, Brittany reached out personally to apologize. Alina, I said horrible things about David, and I've regretted them every day since. I was caught up in wedding fantasy and lost sight of what actually matters. I'm genuinely sorry. Thank you, Brittany. That takes courage to acknowledge. Marcus talks about David all the time now, about his dedication, his coaching philosophy, how he inspired kids. I wish I'd known him. I think we would have been friends. I think so too, I replied, and meant it.
The foundation continues growing. Marcus and I have coffee twice a month, and he started volunteering at foundation events. My parents have contributed both financially and personally to the organization. Even Brittany, who works in dental hygiene, provides free dental care for our scholarship recipients. Most importantly, David's legacy lives on in ways that selling his medals never could have achieved. Young swimmers visit the Olympic Training Center and see his medals, read his story of overcoming poverty through dedication and community support. They leave inspired, carrying his message that dreams, coupled with hard work, can overcome any obstacle. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? Sometimes the hardest part of caring for others is learning that true love requires saying no to destructive requests, even when they dress up as family loyalty. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's poor choices and instead help them face reality in a way that promotes actual growth. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and growth. And remember, sharing these stories helps others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Thank you for being part of this conversation, and I wish you strength in your boundaries and healing in your relationships. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.